This conversation was absolutely insightful. I hope our customers,
Viewers.
hello everybody, and welcome to our session on economic inequality in India.
आज हम बात करेंगे कुछ हार्श रियलिटीज के बारे में रिगार्डिंग ग्रोइंग इनकम एंड वेल्थ इनइक्वालिटी इन इंडिया।
एक रिसर्च पेपर आया था इस हफ्ते नेम्ड Income and Wealth Inequality in India 1922 to 2023, the rise of the billionaire Raj, and it has been doing rounds on the internet.
मैं हूँ विकास।
मैं हूँ Prashita, and today we have with us Mr. Nitin Bharti, who is the co-author of this groundbreaking article.
तो चलिए समझने की कोशिश करते हैं कि why some people thrive while others struggle.
We shall be delving into growth, policy, and global impacts. Let's get rolling. Hello, Mr. Nitin. Let us start the discussion from the basics. You talked about wealth and income throughout the paper. Can you elaborate on the differences between the two? Like, how are wealth and income different?
Hello. Thank you for inviting me. In the way we are using wealth is actually net wealth in the paper. So in the sense, it is the value of the total assets you own minus the debt you have. In economics, then income is kind of like in technical words, it's money flowing into four factors of production. So if you're thinking about if you're bringing land, then you could have rental income. If you are bringing entrepreneurship, then you have profits. If you have capital as a stock, then the underlying sort of income is your interest income and so on.
So, do you see a discrepancy in methods used by organizations like NSSO in estimating the wealth and income of the people? Like, what was your approach here, and how is it different?
Great. Okay, so let's say if the objective is to get the average income in a country, what you would require somehow the best thing would be if you have information of income for each and every individual. Now, in a country with 1 billion or more than 1 billion population, how are you going to do that? It's super expensive to go and collect this information from each individual. So these surveys, what you try to do is you randomly select some area or you randomly select some population, which will give you the information of the entire population. So this random sample will provide you the information for the entire population. Okay? Now, often it is found that these surveys they have issues, and these issues relate on several fronts. So the first issue is what we call non-sampling issue, or like sampling issue you can think of, where if let's say in a society you have very few individuals who have lots of incomes, so let's say very small number of rich individuals, if you are randomly going to select population, it is highly likely that you are going to miss them. You will not capture them. So unless you make an effort in your survey to actually oversample the rich population, you are not going to sample enough of the rich population. And so your surveys are going to not give you the sort of the right metrics of income or wealth, right?
But then just one question I wanted to ask, that the sampling that you were talking about, are you saying that the rich are left out in the sample sizing when we do?
Yes. So, for example, if you have, so usually in these surveys, let's say in a country, our country, these surveys, they randomly sample 100,000 households. Okay. And if you think like on average, one household has 4 individuals or 5 individuals, you have like 500,000 individuals. So this is a like relatively small number, right? Like from 1.4. Now, if you have a situation where the income or wealth is concentrated in very few individuals, then even if you are going to randomly select population, the likelihood to select those rich population is lower, right?
So if there is some kind of exclusion for the rich, so would it be right if I say that the wealth is actually underreported?
Yes, so the problem of underreporting is also there when it comes to income or wealth. For example, if somebody comes to your house and starts asking you about your income and wealth, most of us are going to tend to underreport, let's say, right? Now, the thing is, This underreporting, if if this underreporting is sort of uniform across the entire income distribution, then there is still no issue. But then this underreporting, for example, a poor person, let's say if your salary is, I don't know, like 1,000 a month, versus if your salary is 1 crore a month, you can imagine that the level of underreporting will be sort of like the chance to underreport is going to be higher if you have higher salary.
As per the paper, there was a increase in income disparity after the economic liberalization of 1991. So, what reasons
Yeah.
contributed to this, and do we say here that that a growing economy will lead to more income inequality?
Okay, so let me begin by your second point first, because this is often a reason given behind the increasing inequality that a country is growing. And so there is a famous Kuznets curve which says that when a country grows, then the inequality grows. And after a certain point, the inequality starts coming down. But empirically, it has not been found that this actually happens. And since we are talking about India, a very comparative country, let's say, is China, which post, let's say, 1980s, 1990s, actually the growth rate in China has been much higher than India. And today, so to give you some context, these two countries were of almost equal sized economy in terms of GDP per capita or in terms of income. But now, you know that China is like more than 2 times of what India is. So certainly it has grown much faster. However, the level of inequality you see there is lower than India. So it gives you uh, sort of a benchmark in some sense that, okay, you could have a higher growth rate at lower inequality. It's not impossible, right? So the answer to this, that, okay, because our country is growing, that's why inequality is rising, is partly true. But I guess there are different ways to sort of keep the inequality in check. If you like, even today, only about 9% of the total adult population pays income tax. So if you just rely on the income tax to get the distribution, that is also incorrect. So you need to combine these two sets of sources. One is survey, which is sort of capturing the bottom end of the population, and one is the income tax data, which is capturing, let's say, the top 10. And now again, the subjectivity comes in where like, what is the merging point? Where do you expect like these two things should merge? And that's the kind of the technical part where we have sort of gone into detail in paper. And now if you come to wealth, once again, you have surveys which are different surveys. It's not the same survey. Okay. For wealth, it's still conducted by NSSO, but it's called All India Debt and Investment Survey, which tries to capture assets and debt information. And from there, you get wealth. Now, for the bottom end, yes, but for the top, as I said, it is not going to capture. So what we do is we use some rich list. Forbes, for example, with every year releases the uh, billionaire list, right?
Yeah.
But then those are only like few individuals, right? Like today, for example, 160 or so billionaires India has. So you have this small set of population. From there, you assume that at the top there is some Pareto distribution which holds, and so you sort of simulate the top uh, part of the distribution, and then you combine. And that's where your question comes in, that why, or like after 1991, it's like along both, on both dimensions, income inequality as well as wealth inequality, you find it has several reasons, right? Like you cannot say that, okay, this is one, there is just one reason or so, but let me go in some structural, like there are some deep-rooted structural issues in India, which we think started uh, surfacing more after the country started growing. And one of them, for example, is our education system. For where to begin with, first India. I mean, not only education but health also. If you think human capital is important, then you see in long run our investment towards social expenditure is lower.
Yeah.
and not lower when it compares to Western world or rich countries. Yes, of course, because we have less money and blah blah. So indeed, compared to
Relative,
them,
in a
yes, but
relative
of
way.
course, but also when you compare it with other developing countries like China or Vietnam, where a country spends more on health and education. Okay, combine combine it to the fact that our education system for very long time, I mean, it started during colonial time period where sort of the objective was not to provide education to everyone. The objective back then was to, okay, you create a certain small number of population which are educated enough who will help them to run the country. Post independence, India sort of continued on the same trajectory. The educational policies were not, let's say, changed drastically. So the focus always remained into the higher education, and in some sense, the primary level education was neglected. And so, because of this, an artifact of this is that even today, you have close to 30% of the population which is illiterate. Now, when China opened its economy, you would be surprised to know that the net enrollment rate at primary level in China was 100 or close to 100%. I mean, it was above 95%. It means that all the children who were supposed to go to school at that time were going to school. The average year of education was very high. Why? Because the way they developed the education system was much more logical. In the first phase, like in 1930s or so, they were investing a lot on the primary level education. Then in 70s, they started investing more on the secondary level education. And now post 2000, you see now China is investing heavily on the tertiary level education. Ours is completely opposite. We have kept investing on the tertiary level education, which caters to, at the end, very small set of population, and a large set of population remains neglected.
Correct.
And so when we opened our economy, uh, we had like our human capital was very poor. We had we had slightly larger share of like tertiary level educated population, but a large chunk of illiterate population. And when the economy started transforming in these two countries, what the advantage of China was that because of this higher level of human capital, more education, they could transition a lot of population at a very fast pace from agriculture to non-agriculture sector. Whereas in India, because a large section of population was illiterate, and I mean, I don't think I have to argue here a lot about when you gain education, it enables you to move from lower productivity agriculture sector to higher productivity non-agriculture sector, right?
So, almost all economists around the world argue that government should be spending more on health and education. Given the geopolitical and economic situation India is in, do we have the scope of deprioritizing essential public expenditures like, say, defense and infrastructure? So, does India present a unique case over here? What is your take on this?
I don't think India is any. I mean, so as I said, the issues I was describing earlier is much more structural in nature, right? Like I'm not talking about today's. I mean, if you tell me that the India's geopolitical situation by like from centuries, it's not from, but from decades, it has remained same, then okay. Or I don't know if you're sort of trying to say that today the geopolitical situation has worsened that India cannot afford to spend more on education. But whatever it is, my entire argument is that for a very long time we have neglected these two sectors and we keep neglecting.
So, is the rise in income inequality an Indian phenomenon or is it like happening at a global level? And under what circumstances do we see a rise in income disparity among different segments of the population?
Global inequality at the world level, at least in the long run, seems to be declining. Like, so when I'm saying global inequality in the sense, then you don't care about the countries, right? At overall level, over time, I think post 80s, 90s, with a sustained emphasis on poverty reduction from World Bank and so on, you have overall at the world level, it is declining. Uh, but that decline is actually if you split the global inequality into two parts, where the inequalities could be between countries and within countries, you know, so the main reason of decline is the reduction in the between country component, where India, China, which were poor countries, they have sort of like in last 20, 30 years, their growth rate has been impressive. And so they have sort of caught up to some extent with the, let's say, the Western rich countries. And because of that, the between country inequality overall, the share of this between country has declined. But if you think about like within country inequality, there it seems that in several countries, the trend is that post 1980s, you find the inequality to be rising. So this is the general trend where in most of the countries post 1980s, it is the inequality is increasing, and one of the reason is that because during that time, 1980s or so, there was sort of the whole thing like globalization started, and before 1980s, the taxation, the top marginal tax used to be very high in India, in US, in Europe, everywhere. It was super high, and then. From 1980s, there was this sort of like tax competition between countries where everybody started reducing their tax again to sort of incentivize companies to come, and all sort of subsidies were given and so on. And because of that, the taxation, the overall top marginal taxes started declining, and then you see because of that, in several countries, the inequality has started rising. Now, of course, this trend, but at a very different level, right? Like, I mean, inequality is increasing, but then the level of inequality right now in India is very, very high. Like in terms of income, for example, top 10% earning 60% of the total national income is probably uh, one of the highest around the world.
So you also talked about the regressive taxation system in the paper, right? How should an ideal taxation system be in India, in a country like India, to address such issues?
So what we are pointing to the regressiveness of the tax is that if you look into this wealth income ratio by at different percentile level, you find that at the lower end it is low, and as you go up, it sort of keeps increasing at a very fast rate, right? So the progressivity of tax, which only is applied on the income and not on the wealth, that's where it leads to the regressivity, in the sense that you actually have very, very high wealth at the right tail. Get
But
it? But
do you have
yeah.
to say something on that, like direct and the indirect taxes that are there in the country? I mean, what should be the mix of direct to indirect taxes, the ratio? How should it be? Like, as far as I know, both of them are equal. The direct as well as indirect tax collection are equal. So, a progressive
So
taxation system would be like taxing the richer the more, right? Like the income tax
yes,
and all, they should be more. So, how do you see like
yeah,
India progressing in this direction?
right. So I guess so. Direct and indirect taxes, when you say they are equal, in the sense that the revenue collection from
Yeah,
them is probably similar
yeah,
from
they
both.
are on similar lines.
Yeah. However, if you know, like the indirect taxation, for example, when you go and purchase something, you pay tax. That is paid by everyone, right? So
Yeah.
that's why these indirect taxes are inherently regressive in nature, because if you buy salt, a poor person or a rich person is going to pay similar indirect tax. And that's why the concept of, that's why these direct taxes, they are made progressive in the in the sense that if you earn more, or then you have to pay more taxes.
So I'd like to ask, what is the way out for India to address the issue of rising income inequality? And what steps can be taken at the government, society, and individual level?
And government, society, and individual
Individual
level.
level.
Big questions. Um, I mean, I think I may be repeating now, but I guess the answer is linked to the problems I mentioned earlier, right? So if the problem is that you are spending less on the human capital, you need to spend more. Now, the thing is, when we are thinking from developing human capital and then sort of targeting the inequality, it is slightly in the sort of medium long run, right? Because it's not going to pay off immediately next year, but I think in the long run, this is probably something where India should focus in terms of increasing. So what government could do is start spending higher shares on the social expenditures. Again, within there, targeting the areas which can benefit sort of the like the poorer population in some sense.
We are done with the government level. Let's talk about the society and the individual level now.
Okay, so at the society or individual level, I think what we should do is we should try to make these issues salient, um, and not sort of just listen and kind of forget about it. So especially like, I mean, during elections or after elections, the issue about education and health, especially in terms of the public facilities, we all know that the situation is very grim. uh, you go in any rural sector and this is very visible. And so as a society, I think we should push our sort of government or elected representatives at the local level to improve these situations.
Got it.
Okay. Okay, so to end the session, just a personal question that I would like to ask: that where do you find yourself in the political spectrum, on left, right, or center?
I think I would leave this up to you to judge me. I think as a researcher, I have done this research in inequality, and I guess the paper is written in quite a political way.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much for your valuable time. This conversation was absolutely insightful. I hope our customers.
Viewers,
So I really hope our viewers benefit from this. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you a lot.